Well, good morning. I want to thank John and Jerry and Wyatt for leading us in worship. And it's good morning. Good morning. I don't know if outside rain makes it worship better or not, but it can't help, that's for sure. I want to thank Randy for preaching last week and for my talent scout, Matt. I called Matt, or I texted Matt and said, hey, I'm not going to be able to preach. You want to preach? And he said he was scheduled somewhere. Let me check. So I said, no problem. You're the first person I contacted, meaning there's lots of people on the list. 5 minutes later, Randy's going to take care of it. So from now on, if I'm not going to preach, I'm just going to contact Matt, say, Matt, I can't preach. And then we'll just see what happens. But I learned later, I thought he'd started calling around. He was with Randy at the time. So. But thank you, Randy. And Matt will get a 10% cut of everything. What a week of weather. You know what weather does? It creates great pictures. So this week, I was in Hanford Thursday about, 4:30, and just, water came out of the skies like I lived in some other state other than California, which all you people trying to move out of California, you don't know what you're getting into. The sleet/hail was flowing down my alley. We had a river, so wide. And I found out later that it was more than just fun pictures. Some businesses were flooded. But I just stood in my doorway and was, taking video of it. And then way home, beautiful double rainbow. Beautiful rainbow. I mean, it was dark on one side of the rainbow and light on the other side. That's, it's just this vivid picture. I'm taking great pictures. Next morning on my way to work, it's just red. Perfect. Sun's just coming up. Everything's turning red. I'm taking pictures. And so Friday evening, I'm sharing these with the family, me and Mary, because we have commutes. We had great pictures of the weather. And all Wendy says is, you guys aren't taking those while you're driving, are you? And it hit me, I got to think probably my favorite pictures that I've ever taken, I've been driving. Sometimes I pull over. Sometimes I'm just all by myself in the middle of nowhere. Including, we went to San Francisco one time on what's the curvy street, Lombard Street? And it was during COVID. Me and Mary had taken Wendy up to the doctor, and it was during the big time crackdown. So we stopped in the middle of Lombard Street because we were the only people on it. I mean, there was nobody above us. There's nobody below us. We got out of the car. We're taking pictures up the street, down the street, posing, I have so many good memories of while I'm driving. And Curtis has brought this up a few times as we've gone through this. We're talking about self-help and I want to emphasize this again. We're not trying to say there's things you should do in your physical life, things you should do in your emotional life, life's just life. And some of the most beautiful things you'll ever see, God do in your life are just while you're driving from point A to point B. And I don't mean physically driving. I mean, your life is what you live. And in that, the closer you draw to God, the nearer you draw to God, God's going to do some amazing things, not because you said this is God time, but it's just lifetime. And so as we go through some of these lessons, keep that in mind. This morning, we're going to talk about Eat That Frog eventually. But we've been looking at several self-help books. This is the last one. This is the last part of the series. And as we've gone through that, I've emphasized this, but we always want to remember that when it comes to our salvation, when it comes to grace and forgiveness of sins, there is no self-help. We're just helpless. We can't help ourselves. And we want to remember that. But Paul in Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 12, we read there that grace was revealed to all. That's God's doing. But grace is training us how to live godly lives. So we're talking about things that we can do to help keep that life of grace growing, to keep our spiritual connection to God growing and healthy. I can't control what brought me into this world. And I didn't have a vote during the 9 months that I was, being formed in my mother's womb. Nobody ever asked, are you okay with this? What do you want us? No, out of my control being born into the world. I'm 56 now. There's some things that are in my control about my health, about how I live my life. And that's we can't control God gave us life. God gave us new life. We were born again. But there are things we can do to make sure that that life stays as healthy as possible in our walk and in our relationship with God. And that's what we're doing. So we've looked at 3 books so far. I'll just recap them real quick. The first one was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Again, I'm not necessarily recommending or not recommending these books. Read it. If your life is magically changed, let us know. But in that book, the author talks about just piling up all your stuff and going through it and decluttering your life. Boy, wouldn't that be great, spiritually speaking? Just take everything. Go through what you're involved in. Go through how you spend your time. Go through all the hours of your week and figure out what brings you joy in your walk with God. And we looked at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and we talked about stripping off all of the clutter and focusing on Jesus, focusing on the joy and how he focused on the joy before him, that life that was set before us. We next looked at a book called Making Your Bed, and we learned some lessons from a man who endured Navy SEAL training. I think the most important lesson I learned from that book is don't ever try to become a Navy SEAL. I don't know how those guys do it. But there were rules about enduring, about starting each day by making our spiritual beds and starting off with that small victory and never giving up and giving others hope. And we looked at Hebrews chapter 12 again, but verses 4 through 13. Life's not fair, but give others hope. Never, ever quit. And again, make your bed. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at the book Atomic Habits, making small changes. And we talked about stacking those small habits up together until great things have been accomplished. And we looked at 2 Peter chapter 1, and in there, Peter talks about adding to our faith. You know, we start with this faith that connects us to a life with God. But then on top of that, add to it moral excellence, then knowledge, then self-control, then patience, then godliness, then brotherly affection, and then last, love for everyone. You know, sometimes it takes small habits to get to the point where you're loving the unlovable. And then this week, we're going to talk about a book called Eat That Frog. I was informed by the librarian cabal in the building that if you're interested in these books, the library has copies. Talk to Alan. Probably Fresno State's got them too somewhere. But you can always check them out. The only one I own is the only one I physically own is the Atomic Habits, and it's collecting dust. So if you want it, let me know. I'll let you borrow it. I like the cover. Eat That Frog. 21 great ways to stop procrastinating. I've read this book. I'm going to be honest, probably didn't affect me the way it's supposed to. Those of you who know me, still not my forte to not procrastinate. Those of you who've worked with me on projects probably think Tim's never read that book. He's lying to us. It is a good book. I'm not going to go through 21 ways to stop procrastinating today. I'm going to be honest. I chose this book mostly for the quote that came with it. And the quote was from Mark Twain. Put that up. If it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. So that Mark Twain's the guy that originally said that. The author liked that quote, and he kind of used a lot of stuff to build that up. But just imagine for a second, we're not talking real life, we're not talking spiritual life. If your job was to eat a frog every day, when do you want to do that? First thing in the morning. I mean, the rest of the day is going to be gravy after that, right? I can't imagine eating a live frog. I can't imagine eating a dead frog. I've never had frog legs. For those of you with French heritage, you can scold me later. But get it done. Rip the Band-Aid off. Do the hard thing first. Because what happens if you don't? You're just going to spend the whole day worrying about the frog. I mean, you're going to spend an 8-hour day at the office, and then probably you're not even going to eat the frog, and then you're probably going to get fired. So that's the lesson there. This is what struck me about that book, not just the quote, but one of the things that I did get out of the book is the author spends a lot of time saying, hey, you need to figure out what your frog even is. What is it that you want out of life? What's your goal? Which I thought was interesting because the last book we looked at talked about it's not about goals, it's about who you want to be. You know, don't do that. Let's look at processes instead of goals. This guy thought, no, it's got to be about goals. So, you know, self-help guys can't agree with each other. Figure out what's important to you, because so much procrastination is centered around not knowing where you want to go, not knowing what you want to get done. And so it's really those two ideas that I want to talk about this morning. Worst frogs first, and what's important to you. What is important to you? I have a great, I don't know if it's admiration. At one point when I was writing my notes, I wrote envy and I erased it. I'm like, that sounds like that's something I shouldn't have. Respect, but I have a deep appreciation for people who are so focused that they make it to the tops of their fields. I can remember, he since has flamed out, but there was a baseball player named Greg Jeffries. Any Greg Jeffries fans? Showing my age. I got one back there. You Mets fan? Yeah, okay, that explains it. Greg Jeffries, when he's learning how to play baseball as a small child, his dad would pitch him baseballs that had numbers written on them. Just a stack of baseballs, numbers 1 through 9 or 0, I don't know. But he'd pitch him the baseballs, like dads do, but he'd make him say what number was on the baseball before he could swing at it. He's teaching him how to, in his mind, stop the rotation of that ball so he knew what it was going to be, curveball, fastball, split finger, whatever it was, and hit it. And sure enough, Greg Jeffries came into Major League Baseball as a phenom. He was supposed to be the next great second baseman for the New York Mets. And he was pretty good for a while. I don't know what happened to poor Greg Jeffries. I remember Tracy Austin playing tennis as a 13-year-old, in ways that I couldn't, if I dedicated my life to tennis and practiced for 56 years and had good health, couldn't match her. Musicians, I don't know how musicians do what they do. I've heard John play something. What'd you used to play? Trumpet? I've heard John play trumpet. I have an appreciation for John playing the trumpet. I've listened to, the greats. I don't know how they do that. I don't know what kind of focus it takes. Scientists. Recently, we watched that movie, Hidden Figures. How does a person become that brilliant? How do you figure how to land a guy on the moon? Don't know. Stalkers. It's the same category, isn't it? There are people who are so obsessed with one thing that they'll do anything to accomplish their goal. And I realize I'm jesting a tad with stalkers, but it's the obsession that has taken over their lives that I wish I had more of. Not necessarily the stalkers, maybe the scientists. Because you have that much obsession that you know what your frog is. You know what you got to do. You know where you want to get to. Yesterday, Mary and I were in the car driving to Costco. We didn't find what we wanted. I don't know how many. So on YouTube, there's this guy. We just like watching him. He's the funnest guy in the world. He tells you the 10 things. That was actually a pretty good impression if you've never seen him. The 10 things at Costco to buy right now or something like that. He does all the other places, but Costco is the only place we ever go. So that's the only one I watch. And one of his things was in category number 10. It was bite-sized churros that he claimed were better than the old churros that they don't sell anymore. So anyway, it was a dog food run, to be honest. They were out of dog food, and we couldn't find the churros. Trip was a bust, except on the way home. We're listening. Mary's in charge of the playlist on the way home. I think she punched in a Journey song to start it off, and then it just went in its own direction. And all of a sudden, a classic, at least for me, maybe not for you. I'm not going to sing it. I'll read the lyrics and maybe sing just a little bit as I do. You should have seen by the look in my eyes, baby, there was something missing. You should have known by the tone of my voice, maybe, but you didn't listen. You played dead. No, but you never bled. Instead, you laid still in the grass, all coiled up and hissing. And though I know, those of you with small children, you can talk to them later. And though I know all about those men, still I don't remember. Because it was us, baby, way before them. And we're still together. And I meant every word I said. When I said that I love you, I meant that I love you forever. And I'm going to keep on loving you because it's the only thing I want to do. I don't want to sleep. I just want to keep on loving you. Credit to REO Speedwagon. I don't know who actually wrote the song. And so we're driving along, and Mary's like, I've never heard this song before. She's giving me this. That's not true. Apparently she had heard it before. But I have REO's greatest hits, and it's a song I'm familiar with. And as we're driving, I said, that guy's nuts. He needs a therapist. I mean, think about what he's saying in that song. And then as we're driving, I said to Mary, you know what that song is? It's the musical score for the book of Hosea. I mean, it is. The guy is insane. Just like Hosea was. No, just like God was. And as we're listening to the song, I told Mary, oh, that's getting into the sermon somehow tomorrow. He knows what he wants. Not healthy, not wise. All of his friends are waving him off. Dude. But he knows. He knows. He's willing to forgive whatever because that's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to sleep. He just wants to keep on loving her. He has a problem. And it hit me. That song describes God's relationship with Israel, doesn't it? That song describes God's relationship with us. I am sure whoever wrote that song was not thinking, Hosea, what could I make out of that? I'm sure whoever wrote that was either writing from his own pain or his friend's pain. Who knows what he was writing from? But it brought something out in my mind. What's important to God? You. I mean, God knows what's important to him. He knows that so much that God's friends, I'm not saying there's more than one God, but can you see God at the therapist and the therapist saying, dude, Israel, let them go. They are bad for you. They're toxic. You know, Cindy Filippi, let her go. Sorry, Cindy, you were looking at me and I needed a name. You know, she's cheated on you. She's lied to you. And don't get me wrong. I picked on Cindy. I could pick on me or anybody in here, you know, over the age of 15. We've all betrayed and stabbed God in the back. And yet, he keeps on loving us. What's important to God? Like I said, I'm sure the author of that song had no intention for it to be used in this way. He's just writing down his feelings towards another person that he loved too much to let go of, even when that other person was a no-good, cheating snake in the grass. But listen to what Paul says. Paul says this, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. I mean, that's like saying, you know, I've already picked on Cindy, I'm just going to plow through. That's like saying Cindy's unpeat. You know, I mean, ungodly. Christ died for those who were the opposite of God. Christ died for God's enemies. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. Boy, isn't that the truth? We kill the righteous people, but the good people, you know, we like them. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's the New International Version. Some other versions actually say, while we were still God's enemies, Christ died for us. God loves us like a crazy person, doesn't he? He loved us when we didn't deserve it. He loved us when we were odds with him. He loved us when we were no good, cheating snakes in the grass. And I'm bringing all this up, number one, because my intention from the beginning was to come back to Eat That Frog and use it as, it's not really self-help. It's God's help. But at the same time, I have this question. What's important to you? God knows what's important to him. He did everything within his power. Despite the best advice of his therapist and friends, he loved you anyway and gave up his own child for you. Hopefully, we know what's important to us. And I'm not trying to define this. I think it's a question we all should ask, and it can be answered a number of ways. But as we talked about a couple weeks when we were looking at adding habits onto each other, we've added the faith to the point where now we are loving everyone. And hopefully, we are loving everyone enough to do crazy things for them. like God did crazy things for us. I started off by saying I have a deep respect for people who do crazy things. Maybe that comes from my own fallacies. There are people that I see do things that I wish I would do. They're just willing to sacrifice beyond where I've sacrificed. They inspire me. The love of God should inspire all of us. Maybe there's something else that is important. Something of God that sparks joy in your life with Him, but something that will require something crazy, something like eating a frog. Figure it out. Figure out what's important. Figure out what your priority is, what your goal is, and then figure out what you got to do to get there. And then eat the worst frog first. Figure it out. Here's the beauty of eating that frog, and we're going to talk about the frog for a little bit. After you've done it, everything else is easy. How many of you have ever watched one of those shows where somebody's got to eat stuff? There's a million of them. Amazing Race, I think I see it on that sometimes. And you always see, there's two kinds of people. There's the people who just realize they got to eat this, and they do. And, whatever. And then there's the people that just look at the bowl for like an hour, and they lose. Okay? If it's a contest, they're losing. Paul goes on to tell us in Romans chapter 5, verses 9 through 10. Since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? For if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? Think about this. God already ate the worst possible frog imaginable. God's already done the worst possible thing you could think of to reconcile you to him. He sent his own Son to die in your place. Worse than that, it was his wrath that crucified Jesus Christ. God poured out his wrath, the wrath that he had towards you, towards me, towards the world. And he poured out that wrath on Jesus Christ instead of us. That's insane. That's crazy. And here's the thought. After that, for God, everything else is easy. I like the way it's phrased in that passage. How much more shall we be saved through his life? I sometimes think that we grow up with this thinking that God did all of this stuff to save us. And then once we were saved, we're just kind of on our own. That's foolish talk. That's kind of like saying your parents raised you till you were 18 and gave up their lives and their careers and spent millions of dollars. I hope you guys are taking notes. And then the day you turned 18, and oh man, I can't quite buy that hamburger. Anybody got a quarter on them? I've done my part. I used to use the analogy of Pepperdine, and then I've had a couple students go there, and I don't use that anymore. I'll use it one more time. Can you imagine sending somebody to Pepperdine or going yourself, and you paid tuition, full tuition? No, don't want Brooke to break out into cold sweats this morning. You paid full tuition, no scholarships at all for 4 years. That's a price tag of somewhere, I don't know. Who knows what it is now? It's a lot of money. I'll just tell you that. 4 years. And you get a notice from the mail on graduation day. We're sorry to inform you that we cannot give you a diploma. You will not be a graduate of this institution until you clear up that library fine of $1.50. You think you could find $1.50? Better yet, if your parents had paid all that money, you think they got $1.50 left? God's done everything else. Now that you're not his enemy, now that you've been reconciled to him, now that you are his friend, now that you are his child, how much more will he do? How much more shall we be saved through his life. If we were brought to God through the death of his son, how much more now that he's alive is he going to do for you? Let's talk about Hosea and Gomer. I'm not going to, if you're not familiar with the Old Testament book of Hosea, read it on your own. It'll probably take you 15 minutes, I'll bet. You could be done. It's a great love story. A little spoiler. Starts off a little rough, just tell you that. But this is my guess. No matter what happened between Hosea and Gomer after they were back together, and if you're not familiar, again, the story kind of ends, looks like they're happy ever after. But I'm sure they had, some little spats after that. Things come up in a marriage. Didn't get one amen there. Virginia, I was counting on you for an amen. Okay. Things come up. Guarantee you is easy compared to what they've been through. Guarantee you. God pursued you when you were his enemies. Now that you're friends, what won't he do for you? And I say all that to get back to us again. If you figured out what's important to you, my guess for a lot of you, it's going to have a who in there somewhere. It's going to have some relationship. Maybe it's your relationship with God. Don't get me wrong. That should be important. That's probably, now that I've said it out loud, everybody said, oh yeah, I should have changed my answer to that. But I don't care what your answer was. But most of you probably came up with a relationship in your head. That's what's important. Maybe it's your relationship with somebody that doesn't know God. And that's an important thing that you want to get to them. Maybe it's a relationship that you used to have that you don't have anymore. Again, maybe it's your relationship with God. Figure out the frog that's keeping you from moving forward. Because it's probably a relationship, and the next thing is, it's probably a tough conversation. It's a picking up the phone. It's a going over to somebody's house. It's a kneeling down in prayer. But there's some communication that probably needs to happen. Something you don't want to have. Do it. Eat that frog. If you've wronged somebody, go talk to them. If somebody's wronged you, forgive them. If you're not God's friend, if you're still not reconciled to God, admit to him that you need him, that you can't do it on your own. Figure out what's important. Figure out the big step that you don't want to take and get it out of the way. If any of you have somebody in your life that you used to really enjoy spending time with, and something's come up, and you're not spending time with them anymore, what's stopping you? Eat the frog. Whatever has to happen after that will happen. And it will be a piece of cake compared to that big step. I don't know everybody in the building this morning. And even those of you I know, I don't know what your answers to those questions are. Maybe your frog is admitting you need God. Maybe your frog is admitting you're helpless. Maybe your frog is admitting that you've been trying to save yourself all these years and you can't. Maybe your frog is admitting you're a sinner. If it is, what better time to eat that frog than right now? Let me leave you with that thought. And in just a second, we're going to stand and sing a song that John has prepared. But let me also leave you with this thought. One more time. What more won't God do for you? He already got up and ate the frog. It was the hardest thing he'd ever have to do. What more won't he do for you if you just but ask? If you're here this morning and you need God in either of those two ways, let me encourage you to come forward while we stand and sing the song.